In case you somehow missed the drama this weekend, what we saw was Sony release a requirement that Helldivers 2 players on Steam have to have a PlayStation Network account to play the game. This was a new addition and was a complete shock, and it was released and announced as if it was always part of the plan, but was just not released right away. And thank you to FPS Plays for the video here for the funny moments of Helldivers 2. I thought it was appropriate. This will now actually be the most of Helldivers 2 that I've actually seen. But just what I want to highlight is, so they added the PlayStation Network requirement. The community immediately revolted, completely lost their minds over this, which is completely reasonable. Yes, do subscribe to FPS Plays there, of course. Yeah, and so what they did is they took to Steam and review bombed the crap out of Helldivers 2, where it went from an overwhelmingly positive review to mixed, and then into overwhelmingly negative in a somewhat shocking turn of events, that it went completely from incredibly positive to totally negative, basically overnight. And Sony continued to do public responses from the corporate messaging network throughout this process, in a spectacular display of how not to handle this sort of thing. So, and then after a very short amount of time, gross, the decision was reversed. So the review bombing was very successful, and it looks like it was actually in part encouraged by one of the community managers of Helldivers 2, who actually vocally encouraged people to review bomb as a way to express their displeasure over the requirement. So this is pretty strange, right? So the move to add the PlayStation Network requirement at all does not feel like it was originally intended, because it actually blocked players' access to the game in a lot of cases. There were actually a number of people who were no longer able to play the game at all because of this requirement, and others who chose not to. That was a good one. Who chose not to just because of the requirement. So, yeah, this really, so just to kind of read into that a little bit too much, what it feels like is Arrowhead Studios is having this incredible moment with this amazing game. Playership is completely through the roof, and someone at Sony Corporate decided that they needed to get in on this, and that they needed to bolster their Sony or PlayStation Network subscribership numbers, and they would do it by requiring that every single Helldivers 2 player sign up for an account. Which, from a corporate perspective, kind of makes sense, but from a gameplay and community perspective is one of the worst things you could possibly do. Put an extra barrier in the way of something that people are really happy about with a buggy, ridiculous thing that nobody wanted. Now, if people wanted a PlayStation Network, that's fine. I imagine they would already have it. Whatever. But yeah, it was obviously a corporate decision that Arrowhead was forced to say was their choice. That, again, is speculation, but seems pretty obvious. And Arrowhead, yeah, had to say it was originally intended and go through all this stuff to justify the decision from corporate. Now, that Sony reversed the decision so quickly is kind of wonderful, but so there is a dark bit here I'll go on before the positive bit. The dark bit, too, is that community manager who I mentioned, who was encouraging players to review bomb the game to express their displeasure, was fired, which, not surprising. It does suck because it was probably the right decision, but not the right decision to do while being paid by the corporate company making that call. So yes, so that community manager was fired, and that really sucks. But apparently he's been getting a ton of community support and a lot of credit, and has been mentioned in many news articles, which is great. So good luck to that guy. The other follow-up that I kind of love is the incredibly tongue-in-cheek move announced, I believe, today, where Arrowhead Studios is memorializing the moment of the review bombing by designing a cape, a cosmetic cape for the game that that is designed based on the negative reviews. Now, I can't find photos of this yet. I'm sure they're somewhere out there and I'll find them. I'd love to see it. But what they're making a cosmetic for the moment that is free to all players, which just is such a tongue-in-cheek way to do this, and the correct way to handle this kind of event. So not only is there kind of a monument to this decision-making process, it highlights the community's strength as a group, able to get in here and get this decision reversed is incredible for the community, and just makes a lot of players even more excited to get back into this and support Arrowhead Studios and just play the game they're loving. Yeah, this is a phenomenal moment, and to put it on the cape and make the cape free is just so good, and I want to see this thing forever. But you can also look at it as Arrowhead Studios obviously, I assume, did not want to add the PlayStation Network requirement. That was probably nonsensical to them, and I'm sure they fought against it. So being able to take this cape and have that be the proverbial head on a pike for corporate and other decision makers who may consider doing that is phenomenal. And this, as like a huge lifelong gaming fan, is such a wonderful moment. On top of Larian Studios CEO Sven Vincke already being just sassy to the sort of corporate decision makers in the gaming world, to have this cape moment on top of that is just very quickly, this is becoming one of my favorite years in gaming for so many reasons. But yes, so there we are. In continuing positive news, we also have early access for Hades 2, just launched this week. I'm doing some videos on it. I did one already with the first impressions video. You can find that on my channel. Yeah, so really very exciting week in a lot of different ways. It started out with a pretty dark weekend that looked definitely bad, but then it is shaping up to be really good. And it just, we are seeing studio heads taking a much more active and vocal role. The Arrowhead Studios' response is somewhat more subtle and more tongue-in-cheek, but it still is a response to corporate decision-making that is just nonsensical. And really highlighting that the importance is the community, the importance is the players, the importance is the quality of the product, the importance is... The most important thing is just doing the job and doing it well, and people will follow, where the corporate decision-making just flies in the face of that in a very active way. And with something like a video game community where you are in it and participating, it's not like an ad break in a Netflix show, which I also don't love. It's significantly more of a hassle and will make people a lot angrier. And there's no reason to do it. I saw somebody say, I believe it was, the podcast Grinding Gear. They had a wonderful point that was just take the win, Sony. Yeah, like they have this incredible game that's doing really well with a great community. Just let that be. Ride on the laurels. Rest on your coattails. Celebrate this moment. Don't use it as an opportunity for a money grab and screw it up. Don't do it. And that's where we are. So we had this great moment where there was a really dumb decision made that was very quickly reversed by a pretty wonderful community moment and is now being memorialized in another community moment. Then we have Hades 2. Yeah, it's just great. So another notch in the favor of developers on the side of developers versus corporate decision makers. I needed that, honestly, having closely watched what happened with Embracer Group and Microsoft's recent decision to close 3 development studios. There's a lot of bad news out there, so it's really good to see some good news and to see such dramatic, extremely public examples of really great products and really great game launches, wonderful game communities, to see how powerful the industry still is as a moneymaker, but then also as something that should not be treated with the usual corporate strategies, right? So, really happy. This is going well. Loving these moments. So, that's it. Cheers. Hope your week is going well.